Good morning to the people of Guam. The Committee of the Whole is still on recess until we reach a quorum. Thank you. The committee of the whole is called to order. Where we left off yesterday, we left off on chapter 12, if I'm correct. Correction, no, we left off on page 111, or chapter 11. Chapter 11, miscellaneous appropriation, and we do have some amendments. And the first one we will address is SB 55 TCN L12 P115, which is line 12, page 115. Senator Nelson, you have the floor. As everybody, I hope you all can see the amendment proffered by Senator Nelson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so there's no confusion, this is for the miscellaneous chapter, okay? And I know it says page 115, but it should be in the miscellaneous provisions, which start on page 116. Okay?
This is this for miscellaneous
That's correct.
provisions? If it's for miscellaneous provisions, then we're still at appropriations. So
Okay.
so technically your page 115 should have been
116.
116. So we're going to go ahead and set it aside until we get to
Miscellaneous
miscellaneous
provisions.
provisions, okay?
Okay.
Is there any other amendments, Renee, for this chapter 11? Senator Rajals? All right, we're going to go ahead and bookmark chapter 11. Now, my colleagues, we are going to go now to the bookmarks. Okay? We're going to go all the way to chapter 1. No, we're bookmarking miscellaneous appropriation. We're not going to go to provisions yet. We're going to go, remember, it was stated, we're bookmarking this. Yes, because we do have still 2 amendments. And we also have Senator Moylan's amendment that was suspended. So we'll just bookmark it. Let's go to the... He asked that the discussion be suspended. And then it was bookmarked. Okay, so chapter 11 is bookmarked. But we're going to go now to the first bookmark. Our first bookmark was on August 23rd, 21, was bookmarked by TMT. Page 8, chapter 1. Let's go to chapter 8. On section 6, the EITC. That was bookmarked by TMT. That would be you, Speaker? Am I correct?
The committee of the whole is back from recess. We are addressing the first bookmark, which can be found on page 3. Is bookmarked by Speaker Terlahi.
Yes, I don't have a floor amendment at this time, so I'd like to yield to the others.
We are still on page 3, the bookmark of page 3, revenues. Is there anyone who has an amendment? Chapter 1, page 3. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment is found on SB 55JSSA L22P8, and it is to amend the section 6 to read, to double underline the part there that after shall be deposited, I'll just read from the beginning. Section 8, earned income tax credit reimbursement. $35 million of all EITC reimbursement received by the government of Guam shall be deposited. This is where the amendment's at. Separate and apart from all other funds of the government of Guam into the 21st Century Healthcare Center of Excellence Fund. Then strike out the general fund. And then it moves on. Such funds shall be expended for the costs associated with the financing, design, construction, maintenance, and related expenses of the 21st Century Healthcare Center of Excellence. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, rule, or regulation, there is hereby created a separate and apart from all other funds of the government, the 21st Century Healthcare Center of Excellence Fund, to be administered by the Department of Administration and is not subject to the transfer authority of Imagahagan Guahan. The fund is created to provide a source of funding exclusively for costs associated with the financing, design, construction, maintenance, and related expenses of the 21st Century Healthcare Center of Excellence. And then on letter B, what I did was we lined out the word deposited. It reads, B, $5 million of all EITC reimbursement received by the government of Guam shall be reserved in the general fund. Such funds shall be expended for the costs associated with the financing, design, construction, maintenance, and related expenses of the new Department of Correction facility. Basically, to my colleagues, is making sure we have a separate fund for the first $35 million, and on the $5 million for the Department of Correction, the funds are reserved because we can't appropriate these funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Anyone on the amendment? Page 8, line 22. Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have no problem with both amendments. I think that for the sake of being able to properly dispose, you're talking about two separate subsections of Section 6. And for the purposes of just making sure that, you know, the discussion is specific to the different different areas that I request or move to bifurcate the amendment.
There's a motion to amend the amendment into two.
No. It's to bifurcate the amendment.
To bifurcate the amendment.
In other words, we talk about the part of the amendment on the 35 mil, then we talk about the amendment for the 5 mil.
Are there any objections to taking the amendment in two parts? No objections. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, with regard to the 35 mil, I appreciate and I thank the author of the amendment. It does put some clarity in the issue in that, you know, there needs to be a continuous discussion on this thing, on this, and, you know, quite honestly, we're waiting on the administration to bring about their plans. This is an effort on our part as a body to be able to say we do recognize and we do know that we do need a a new hospital. And we're willing to have that discussion. I appreciate too that it's not a matter of, we're not just giving it to them now without the plans. What this is saying is basically these monies will be held in reserve. Let's have that discussion. Let's have that discussion real soon. Okay? And in that is that if you're not ready for this, there are other pressing needs within the government that we can use the money. However, we'll hold to our commitment. That we will help you. We will help to be able to start to fund the construction of a new hospital. But they have to do their part. Enough of the talk. Let's do the walk. And we're waiting for it. But we're not going to wait too long. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Anyone on Part 1 of the San Augustine Amendment? This is addressing Section 6, Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC reimbursement, Section A. Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If the sponsor of the amendment would yield, I just want to clarify, Senator, with regards to setting aside this account, specifically for the healthcare facility, hopefully that we're looking at a new hospital facility, because, when we did receive that briefing from the Army Corps, I think it even brought clearer to light some of the concerns that I have. I know some members of the body have raised with regards to how prepared we are as a government to move forward with the construction of a new hospital without really any concrete plans, so to speak, before us, to know what size of facility we're looking at, what capacity, how many beds it's going to accommodate, what the cost ultimately is going to be. So I just wanted to clarify in setting aside these funds that, we're looking at still making the commitment to move forward with a new hospital, and we understand the need for it. But just to make sure that these funds are not going to be accessed until we see, a more organized outline plan before us, so that, our people know what exactly it is they're investing in and what they're investing in for the long term for the construction of a new hospital facility.
Senator San Augustine, do you yield to the question?
If you could just repeat that question one more time. But I just wanted to make it clear, and even though I might have missed it, but
No problem.
on September, it will come before the body to discuss on Bill 121, which is about the funds. And if there's no plans yet, I'm in full support of identifying that funds to go wherever it needs to go to take care of the people of Guam. That's our priority.
No, and I appreciate that, Senator San Augustine, because certainly, I know when we get to the second half of your amendment, since it's being separated, I'd be happy to talk about that. But I think we generally have a consensus that we know there's a need for construction of a new facility. Otherwise, the cost of refurbishing and trying to rebuild the existing hospital is financially going to be very challenging as well. And certainly we would like to invest in a new facility that's going to take us into the future. But I also want to make sure, Madam Chair, that we do that responsibly and that we know exactly what we're investing in. I mean, when you're putting this kind of money up, it's like buying a car sight unseen, not knowing what exactly you're putting your money towards. And considering this amount, I still have not seen provided to the legislature or the people of Guam really specifics other than potential locations and the desire to consolidate a new hospital with behavioral health and public health to be included as a campus. And I think those are all wonderful ideas. But, I want to know what it is that we're actually getting and what we can fund and ultimately what our people can afford, because I don't want to see us in a situation where every 30 to 40 years there's an expectation that, we're simply going to tear down and build up a brand new facility. Because we're talking 30, 40 years, we're talking when we pay off the debt service of a new facility. And I also want to bring to light, we have many, many other public buildings on Guam that are over 50 years old. There are many schools in our educational system, and certainly I know the frustrations and issues that have been brought up with Simon Sanchez High School. Simon Sanchez High School that was built in the early 1970s, around 1972 or so. And yes, understandable, there have been issues in trying to get that facility rebuilt. Of course, a number of years ago, the issue was brought up about the need to refurbish the JFK, and I was involved in that when I was at DPW with issues related to the refurbishment. Of course, we're happy that was finally completed. But when you look at the amount of debt service that gets added to the government and to the people, it's significant. And there are many other schools on Guam that are far older. What about George Washington? What about Price Elementary School, which when I was a little student, used to go to? That facility is definitely over 50 years old. And the list can go on. So I think we just need to be mindful. We all love new things, new buildings, new everything. But can we afford it? And are we, as we make these decisions moving forward, are we also considering the other list of priorities in this government, particularly where our children go to school? What are we going to do for debt service with regards to all those other facilities that are even far older than our hospital, far older than Simon Sanchez? So we just need to be mindful and responsible in how we spend the people's money. And while I realize, we're very fortunate to be able to receive this EITC reimbursement, because for many years we've argued that this should not be a burden of our people. This is something that the federal government should be responsible for. And we're very happy to hear that it's finally happening. But at the same time, I don't want to see a mad rush of, it's very easy to appropriate, want to take credit that we're funding things. But we need to be careful how we spend this money, because we are entering into uncharted territory financially in the next year or two. And I think we've just seen in the last few days since we were here on Friday, the impact that decisions that are being made, even in how we're dealing with this pandemic, are impacting our community and impacting our local businesses. I'm sure we'll probably find out from a number of our restaurants on Guam how they've been doing financially the last few days in terms of patrons, because I haven't entered a restaurant since, Friday? Well, I can maybe Friday, but I haven't in the last few days. I'm sure people probably have a lot of reservation with what's going on, so, we want to hope we're on an upward trend, but we see how things can quickly shift and government policies can impact our community, and right now it's not doing it in a very positive way. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your feedback with regards to your amendment and putting this forth, and I just want to make sure, particularly when we make these very big investments, that we're doing it responsibly, especially with regards to finances and resources of our people. With that, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to comment on this amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Senator Snogstein, would like to answer the question?
Senators, Madam Chair, I ask that we take a quick recess because the clerks will fix the amendments for the technical, but generally everything is okay, but they just need a short recess.
Yes, thank you. We will take a quick recess. This section of the revenues was previously amended, so we want to make sure that this new amendment reflects those previous amendments. So we are in recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Senator San Augustine, we are still on your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd ask my colleagues to refresh their drive because we bifurcated my amendment. It'll read SB 55 JSSA L22 P8A. So you see that it's separated so that it's specific to letter A with what we're discussing. And then I'll continue on with the next part.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. So last who had the floor was Senator Brown, who asked you a question. Senator Brown. Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the San Augustine amendment? Letter A of Section 6, EITC. On the amendment? Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Can I just wait for a copy of the amendment?
Sure, we will take a brief recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I support this amendment, and I'm glad that it's made to separate these funds and keep them hopefully in a lockbox reserved for this purpose and not able to be used for any other purpose except for this, because this is a huge chunk of money that we are dedicating and you know, for purposes of the new hospital. So I commend the author on creating this lockbox for it and that it be reserved. I just hope that our language is strong enough to really reserve it, as we have seen, despite this type of language in other statutes, special funds, we've seen money transfer out of those, and so I'm praying that that does not happen. I do have an amendment, however, to this section A, subsection A, to add the words, well, does the clerk have that yet? Not yet. I'm so sorry, if I could just request 1 minute recess.
And a brief recess.
It should be ready, yeah.
Yes, brief recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We are on Speaker Therese Terlahi's amendment. So please, amendment to the San Agustin Amendment, please refresh your Google Drive. And when you find the amendment, it is titled TMT to JSA Amendment, and you can see where the changes to the amendment are being made with a double underline for what is newly added in this amendment, and Senator San Agustin's amendment still in the single underline. SB 55 TMT L22 P8, letter A. You're welcome. Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your patience, colleagues. Again, I support the original amendment by my colleague to lockbox this money that is coming from EITC reimbursements, which is a new thing for the government of Guam. And so this particular subsection A is for 35 million of EITC reimbursements. So what my amendment is going to do is based on what we heard from the Department of Revenue and Taxation. We heard from them that they haven't yet negotiated the plan or the agreement with the Department or U.S. Treasury for this reimbursement. They don't know yet if this will be an advance, just like the CTC reimbursement they are getting now is an advance. And that in that case, the CTC reimbursement is being placed into a trust fund, a separate trust fund, and they are required to use that in advance to pay out certain types of refunds. So we're not sure if they're going to be restricted when this money comes in advance and need to use it for refunds, or if we as the government of Guam can take it again and use it for any purpose. So I just wanted to accommodate that possibility. I also wanted to accommodate the possibility that the money or the financing for the hospital, despite all their efforts, may not, they may be ready to begin certain aspects of it, but the pledge of $35 million might not be necessary during FY2022. We during the hearings on the new hospital, received testimony from GITA on July 22, 2021 in a letter, and they state, I would like to first state for the record that whenever a capital leaseback financing is contemplated, the first lease payment is normally made after the facility is completed, usually in the second year after the financing, which is when construction and occupancy of the buildings are complete and ready for the healthcare agency to use the newly constructed facility. So the first lease payment for our first priority Department of Public Health and Social Services may not become due until FY 2023, or even more realistically in FY 2024. Subsequently, the payment for the Guam Memorial Hospital will be due once they move into their new hospital facility, either in FY 2025 or FY 2026. This is, that's GITA, and that's contemplating a lease back. Of course, we are probably going to authorize them to do bond financing or lease back or any other financing that they can come up with that would be more valuable to the government of Guam. And so we don't want to tie their hands, and we don't, we want to continue to make this money available, but if not, going to be used in FY 2022, then my amendment adds the words, would add words to this amendment to put this money, if it's deemed either necessary for the tax refunds pursuant to the agreement that DRT makes, or not necessary during FY22 for the financing aspect, that it would be transferable to the Income Tax Refund Efficient Payment Trust Fund and applied to A status returns. So I'm hoping that this is a win-win situation, and that my colleagues, I'm just going to read the words I'm adding. Except if needed to pay tax refunds or if not necessary for fiscal year 2022 hospital financing, it shall be transferred into the Income Tax Refund Efficient Payment Trust Fund of Chapter 51, Title 11, and apply to A status returns. This is to provide for either of those alternatives. If DRT enters into an agreement where the money is necessary, upfront in advance, or if the financing is not ready in FY22, that we can use this for refunds. And I've said on previous, attempts at increasing the provision for refunds, I don't think we have enough if this reimbursement comes in late to pay refunds promptly or to catch up with refunds. And so if we are able to do it because of, financing, depending how the financing goes, then I propose that be our number one priority and that we allow that to happen immediately. I would like to ask as well that this amendment be subject to legal's technical amendment. I'm adding a clause to one sentence. I'm not sure, honestly, if it goes to this sentence or the next. So I'm going to ask legal to add this clause, either here where I have it or to the next sentence as they see fit. And so I ask my colleagues for their support on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Speaker Terlahi. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not against tax refunds, but the word except if needed to pay tax refunds. And then the or. A lot of the except pretty much doesn't even give a shot in the dark with Bill 121 that's coming up in next month that will be brought to the floor. I don't like to have a preemptive strike that 121 is not going to pass. The body will decide it then. And the information that will be brought before the floor in September on Bill 121 would determine that the money will not be needed. It's kind of like announcing to the to the folks that you said you don't need it. You say it again, then it's needed. The words may change come September, that it's needed. And that's why, and with the word except if needed to pay refunds, that automatically jumps that to the priority, and it's not about the hospital. It's not about anything of health. And that's how I interpret it. And others may have a different interpretation. Or if not necessary. It's either it's necessary or it's not necessary. And if it's determined then that it's not needed for FY22, then whatever bill is available that will take the money, take the funds, and disperse it to set the priority that this body decides, then so be it. But I'm not against refunds. We do have a court order that refunds must be paid 6 months from the date that is filed, that needs to be filed, which is in April. You have until October, and right now they're paying October today. They're paying April. Folks that file in May, not required to be given the refunds no later than November. So it just moves down the line. And I agree, if we can pay the refunds earlier, fine, that's great. But the amendment is all about to support and to reserve, lockbox the $35 million for the hospital or public health, and behavioral. But to put, I'm just not comfortable with the except if needed. That kind of trumps the beginning part of letter A. So I don't rise in support, and we do have bills. The bills will come up in next month. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. Senator Titagli and then Senator Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question to OFB with regards to this amendment. We're trying to take this funding from the Earned Income Tax Credit reimbursement and locking it away to ensure that, the administration cannot touch this funding. And, we've, several of us attended the Army Corps of Engineers presentation regarding the hospital. Anyways, and I see what we're trying to do. I mean, I understand that, the importance of building a hospital. I'm an advocate for it, to building a new hospital. It's very important. But I also realize that this hospital is going to take a couple years before they even decide on the plans or even to break ground, according to the Army Corps of Engineers. This is not me, and I hope it was recorded so that the people of Guam can actually see. If I'm not mistaken, media was there. That'll take a couple years. So we're supposed to sit on this $35 million and just sit on it until they're ready, when we can actually use this funding to help pay tax refunds? That's the rate. I would rather do that. You know, you're holding hostage this money when there are people out there who need their tax refunds. Now, I understand there's a bill coming up to discuss this funding and this money, but what do we do until the meantime? I mean, 2 years from now before we even get started? We just let it sit in an account while people need this funding? I mean, that's the Earned Income Tax Credit reimbursement. That's what it's for. And we're veering away from that to build a new hospital with it. Well, that's fine. But in the meantime, I think we should be able to pay our tax refunds until until the hospital is ready, the plan is ready. But my concern here, my greatest concern here is if this opens the door to put some of this money into the general fund, then the administration has an opportunity to take money out of this. The lockbox was created, this fund was created to lock this money into a lockbox so that the administration doesn't put their hands on it. Let's be honest here, straightforward, blunt. And so what I'm worried about is if we have this amendment here, that she'll be able to get her hands on it because it's regarding tax refunds. However, it does say here, and again, sorry, OFB, I'm making this longer than I should, but this section that reads Tax Refund Efficient Payment Trust Fund. By reading this amendment, does this mean that the money would be transferred into there from the lockbox? Or does it go straight into the tax refund efficiency payment? Because, you know, you got two boxes here. So what is your interpretation of once we receive the earned income tax credit, would it go into the tax refund trust fund or would it go into the lockbox?
Senator, if I can just remind those out there, this is reimbursement money back to the government of Guam. The government of Guam has already paid out the tax refunds. This is a reimbursement from the federal government back to Guam for its cost of paying tax refunds. My understanding now, since this is a reimbursement to the government of Guam, I would think that because the initial funding that was paid out for tax refunds came from the general fund, it would be deposited back into the general fund. Now, if there's any provision in law that will now take this money and set it aside specifically for a specific purpose or project, then they will do so. I believe this particular amendment being made is to do that, is to put it aside for the hospital. And it's my understanding that next month, in a few days from now, they will entertain, I believe, the hospital bill, and they will decide the fate of what this money is going to be used for and when it can be used for. So I believe the whole purpose of the amendment is to put aside this money that is being deposited into the general fund for the purpose of the construction of the hospital or the health facility of excellence. That's what it does.
But my question is, okay, so you said that the government of Guam will have to pay out the earned income tax credit first. So it comes from the general fund. And then the federal government then reimburses the government of Guam. It goes back into the general fund. When it goes into the general fund, will it go into, based on this amendment, will it go into the 21st Century Healthcare of Excellence Fund? Or based on this amendment, will it go into the Tax Refund Efficiency Payment Fund?
I am assuming, Senator, based on the amendment, that the purpose of the amendment is to set this money aside specifically for the hospital. So if, when it's deposited into the general fund, if this provision should pass, it will set up an account, and that this money would be deposited into that account.
Lester, Steve,
if
you're
I
not
may.
answering my question. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, please, Speaker. Yep.
Speaker Terlahi, you have a point of information?
Yes, I agree with OFB. The intent is that the existing floor amendment sets that the money, the 35 million EIT reimbursement is going to be put into this 21st Century Healthcare Center of Excellence Fund. What I'm trying to do is say, after it's in there, if we get it, it goes, and it's not needed in FY22, that they can transfer it immediately to another lockbox. And these are both lockboxes, so I don't think there's a risk unless they don't follow the law again. But I know for a fact that the Income Tax Refund Efficient Payment Trust Fund is locked, and that it's even been decided by the courts that the governor cannot use it for any other purpose. And again, Department of Revenue and Taxation made it very clear to us that they are not sure how this reimbursement comes in. They're not sure whether we're getting, as OFB is describing, that we're getting reimbursement after we've paid it out, or whether we're going to get it in advance. They said very clearly they are hoping to get it in advance. And so that's why I am concerned, except if needed to pay tax refunds, that if they get it in advance, then they might be restricted to use it for that. And that's all. I don't want to tie their hands in their negotiations. If we can get it in advance, that's even better, I think, for the taxpayers. And so that's all.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for
Senator
that information.
Augustine, you have a point of
I
information
still have
as
the floor,
well.
Madam Chair. I
Senator
still have the
Augustine, you
floor.
have a point of
Senator
information?
Tello,
Oh, point of information?
I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to ask for better clarification of the response from OFB. I think your question was, and I may be wrong, but you wanted to understand when it said, except if needed to pay tax refund. Tax refund is always going to be needed. So when you have that word there, that means that becomes a priority. Let's start with that. And I need OFB to clarify that answer, because I didn't hear that response from your question. And I think that's what needs to be clarified first.
Okay,
Thank
can we
you.
get an answer from OFB, please?
Yeah. In addition to what Speaker Talaya mentioned, is that if the funds are needed to pay tax refunds, it actually won't even go into this lockbox. They'll just take it from the general fund and pay directly tax refunds. That's the way the amendment is.
And that was the question I was asking.
Yes.
About the funding. Where is it going to go first? Is it going to go first into which account? And now you're saying that according to your interpretation of this amendment, that any kind of reimbursement or funding from the EITC is going to go strictly to tax refunds, that account. Is that what you're saying?
Senator, like the Speaker said, the only caveat now that we don't know is how the money is going to come back, whether it comes back as an advance or it comes back as a
Right.
reimbursement. But either way, if it does come to Guam, if it comes to a reimbursement, then of course that money would be deposited into the general fund. What happens when the money there is just dependent on what happens here. If it comes as an advance, then of course that money has to be paid directly to tax refunds.
Okay, that's based on your interpretation. So based on this amendment, it goes straight to paying tax refunds.
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. And then the next would be whatever left over would go into the first, if there's no tax refunds that need to be paid, it goes into the Century Healthcare Center of Excellence Fund, the way this amendment is reading. Okay, I just wanted to verify that. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Snoggeson, for your input as well.
Anyone on the Terlahi amendment to the San Augustine amendment? Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have a different perspective, and I understand the speaker's desire to want to ensure the money goes to tax refunds. And I'm certainly, and I've been very vocal, I'm not, jumping up and down on this whole idea of this medical complex of excellence. We keep using that word excellence as if we can just simply tell ourselves we're that. and we can't even right now get, basic medicines to the hospital, right now, here where we are today. I have to, in this sense, even though we are dealing with the Terlahi amendment, it's an amendment to the amendment provided by Senator San Augustine, and I am definitely open, because I don't think the budget bill is the time and place, because we simply, I've never been through a budget where we have so many bookmarks as we go through sections, and we have to go back and forth, back and forth. But nevertheless, here is where we are. But I really would like to have a discussion with regards to the hospital itself. And I'm no fan of sitting here going, oh yes, let's guarantee them 35 million up front or 70 million combined for the next 40 years, sight unseen. But I think we need to have that discussion. I think we need to have it publicly, but I don't think it's going to happen here in the next few days as we're dealing with this budget bill. And I certainly would prefer that we do have that open discussion, as Senator San Augustine has put forth, next month, so that we can discuss it, because I think we do agree we need to build a new hospital. The size, the magnitude, the cost, whether or not it's part of this complex, I think all those discussions need to happen, even though I've certainly made my position very clear with we're not wanting to support a high-priced complex that, can our people pay for it? I guess we should better say, can our grandchildren pay for it? Or in some cases here, our great-grandchildren pay for it. But I think that discussion needs to happen. Tax refunds, this issue has been going on for so many years. Everyone's been running to the forefront to want to get credit. This was a Republican idea, and it was dissed by the Democrats, and the Democrats embraced it. It became their idea. Then you have a Republican administration that made that primary agenda was to pay tax refunds. Then the Democratic administration came in and said, oh, we can do it better and faster. So we're all tripping over ourselves to make sure we get tax refunds out there, and I think that's a very good thing. Anyone who has money that is theirs, that is being held by the government, by all means, they should get paid. But are we going to do that at the expense of other critical things in the government or critical discussions that need to happen? Because I'm all for paying tax refunds, but I also want to make sure do we have money to take care of other critical needs in the government. I'm not for holding people's money. But things are moving a lot faster than they were when tax refunds were not getting paid, when you had to call the governor's office and literally beg and say that, oh my goodness, I have a family crisis, I have a family emergency, I have a family health issue, I've had death in my family. Can I please get my tax refund? We don't want to ever see those days again. It's totally unnecessary to have to go through that to get money that is owed to the people because it's their money. But I don't think that this is the juncture to do this at this point without having that public discussion with regards to, and I don't see myself either supporting, we're going to put $35 million aside out of the Earned Income Tax Credit this year, especially when the information, or shall we say the lack of information, has really been provided to the public and ourselves, and what exactly are we paying for? But I'm not opposed to putting money forward to begin the planning process. And I think the dialogue that we had the other day that was provided with the assistance of our congressman put a lot of additional questions in my mind and opportunities that we can look at. If they are going to pursue this design with Army Corps, whoever it is that they're going to look at with regards to consultants of putting this together. But I think that's a discussion that we need to have. We need to be able to talk about that. And we're not going to decide it, as I mentioned at the very beginning of my comments, we're not going to decide it in the next few days of this Budget Act. So I support Senator San Augustine's position to have this discussion next month. And we can very easily, colleagues, we don't need to look at this like, we look at legislation, we don't do it now, oh my God, what are we going to do? We got to do it now. We can come back any day of the week, any time of the day, and change laws very quickly. This process moves as fast and as slow as we want it to. This is not the beginning and the end all because we're dealing with it, but we can come back tomorrow and amend the Budget Act after it gets passed, if it gets adopted into law. There's nothing to prevent us from doing that. Any appropriation we put in here, we can always go back and change it tomorrow. But I think these are important discussions. They're very big discussions, and I don't want to see all this being taken, put aside, without having the discussion of how we're going to address at least the preliminary funding of planning and design for a new hospital facility, because something has to give at some point. We all say health care is important, and but we're not going to be able to make that decision now. And I'm very concerned about we're going to scoop all this up and put it in for tax refunds when I'd like to know why tax refunds are not being set aside as they're being paid, which really is what was supposed to happen. As these amounts were coming in, a percentage was to be set aside to make sure that payments could be made by the government of Guam as a result of the court order within a 6-month period. But what's happening is that money's all getting gobbled up, the money's not getting set aside, and now we have to go back and reappropriate to put it aside in the government budget to pay for it. So again, I also support the intent of the speaker and what it is she wants to accomplish, but I think we need to have a bigger discussion before we make these decisions on how all this money is going to be spent. And I'm certainly open to the discussion that Senator San Agustin is putting forth next month, which is just, a few days away, it's going to be September, to address how we're going to fund the hospital. Because I'll tell you, if we were going to do a direct appropriation of the hospital at $35 million in this Budget Act, I wouldn't support it. So I think, colleagues, we need to keep that in mind and be responsible how we move forward. And I would be concerned that we're going to totally remove that possibility of doing the seed money by putting all this money into the income tax account. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to comment on this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Anyone on the Terlahi amendment to the San Agustin amendment? Speaker Terlahi.
Madam Chair, I'd like to withdraw that amendment. I have another one making technical changes to that, if you would bear with me. It should be uploaded right now.
Sure, we'll take a moment's recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We will entertain the motion to withdraw the Terlahi Amendment, amending the San Augustine Amendment. On the motion to withdraw, any objections? Motion passes. Speaker Terlahi, you're still recognized. And colleagues, we are on SB 55 TMT L22P8AR.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, again, thank you for your patience, and thank you to legal for their assistance and the clerk's office in helping with the technical amendments. So I'm making a motion again to amend the amendment. So the current bill says that we're setting aside $35 million for the design of the 21st Century Healthcare Center of Excellence. The amendment by my colleague is that this will be put into, the set-aside money will be put into a lockbox, and I completely support that. My amendment is to provide for a contingency, and so it would be to add the words, provided that if such funds are required to pay tax refunds pursuant to an agreement with the U.S. Treasury, or if not necessary for fiscal year 2022 hospital financing, such funds shall be transferred into the Income Tax Refund Efficient Payment Trust Fund of Chapter 51 and applied to A status returns. This makes it so that these contingencies, if they occur, then the money can be transferred immediately, and there shall be no additional delay or concurrence necessary or consensus necessary. And again, yes, I am trying to prioritize tax refunds if the money is not going to be used for a hospital, right? And so this does not take any of that money away from the hospital. It says, first of all, it acknowledges that the Department of Revenue and Taxation was very clear when they talked to us that they haven't yet negotiated for this reimbursement. It's new, and they are going to make an agreement with the U.S. Treasury. And they said very clearly they are going to push for advance reimbursement. And we have seen with the agreement they've entered into for advance reimbursement of the child tax credit, that there are restrictions placed on them. The money goes into a different trust fund, and it's paid for the refunds, earlier, made available earlier. And so I just want to provide that if that is the case, and these refunds are coming in advance, reimbursements are coming in advance, that they be used for the purposes that they're being sent to us. That is in advance for payment of EITC tax credits. If that is not the case and there's no restriction on the funds, then there's no harm by my amendment. My amendment also provides for the contingency, as we've been told by Gita, again in their testimony, they said that for the record that whenever a capital leaseback financing is contemplated, the first lease payment is normally made after the facility is completed, usually in the second year after the financing, which is when construction and occupancy of the buildings are complete and ready for the healthcare agency to use the newly constructed facility. So the first lease payment for our first priority Department of Public Health and Social Services may not become due until FY2023, or even more realistically in FY2024. Subsequently, the payment for the Guam Memorial Hospital will be due once they move into their new hospital facility, either in FY2025 or FY2026. This is if we use leaseback financing as contemplated. And this is Gita's testimony. And so this is another contingency that I am trying to provide for, that if we do leaseback financing and we're not going to use $35 million in financing in FY22, and I'm not saying we're not going to use it for the hospital, I'm saying we're not going to use it in FY22, that money this year and this year alone in FY22 could be placed in this tax refund account, and it can be used to catch us up in past due refunds. It can be used to pay refunds faster than 6 months. I know many are satisfied with 6 months, but I'm not. 6 months is still way, way beyond the average among the states is 6 to 8 weeks. And I think at a time when people really need this cash, when pool has ended, when employment is uncertain, that this is the time for us to stop borrowing their money, stop owing them money, and just to make good on that debt first. And no critical services of the government is jeopardized by this amendment to provide for this contingency. Not a single agency or service is jeopardized by doing that. It would just be making good on a debt that we owe taxpayers, and we've always owed them, but we've been saying it's okay not to pay them. And I don't agree with that this year, and I don't agree with that while the government of Guam sits on $600 million in ARP funds that they can take care of every other contingency. This is one thing that we, the legislature, can do, is to take care of these taxpayers faster and to catch up. Some people, have said they don't want to set aside this money for refunds now. But the money is being set aside now for possibility of financing this healthcare center of excellence. So my amendment is, if it is not necessary for the financing of that healthcare center in FY22, which was what Gita said was pretty likely, that it's not going to be necessary until the building is built, that we are going to pay the lease back payments. Then if that's the case, it's cash. Cash is how we pay refunds. It's the only way. And we have all kinds of laws saying it's the priority of the government of Guam. And so I'm trying to act consistent with that we show that it is our priority, it still is our priority, that above anything else, that we pay refunds, that we dedicate our cash for that. And my amendment does not jeopardize the setting aside of money. And I think we have to be realistic that we are setting aside EITC reimbursements. We're not setting aside general fund revenues or setting aside, money that is, from any other kind of taxes. It's being set aside from earned income tax reimbursements that we do not yet, we've never seen yet, that we may need to pay refunds. And all I'm trying to do is make sure that if this is a possibility, that it happen automatically, that we not have to come in here and argue about it again, and that if they need it for financing of the hospital because they decide to do a bond or something in FY22, then so be it. But if they do not need that money, $35 million, that there is no delay in getting that money to tax refunds immediately in FY2022. And I'm telling you, this is one opportunity that we have to make good on refunds that we may never have again. Because we can't control the ARP funds, because we can't control the other transfer of money, and we can't control the deposit of cash, we can try to control here what we do with reimbursements, cash that we're getting in. And once it gets into this payment trust, income tax refund trust fund, it is locked up pursuant to the courts. That is a guarantee. So again, this year we can pay faster and we can catch up. They just need more cash. And so that's all I'm asking, is to provide for this contingency. And so I sincerely ask my colleagues for their support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Terlahi. On the Terlahi amendment to the San Agustin amendment, Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will reiterate to my colleagues, I support tax refund. The leading part of this amendment, it says, provided that if such funds are required to pay tax refund pursuant to an agreement with U.S. Treasury. Let's just all remind ourselves, number one, Congress passed it, the President signed it. It's a federal mandate, EITC, now it's federally funded. Okay, let's just put that aside. If you notice that how we did the budget, it was only 74 million for refunds, and the only reason why it was identified because the other portion that we used to be required to pay is EITC, CTC, and ATC was a wash because when you pay it, it gets reimbursed, it's done. CTC and EITC is paid for now by the federal government. So I don't know what agreement or what anticipated agreement with the treasurer would exist. I don't see it coming. It's a federal mandate being federally funded. Next one, if not necessary for fiscal year 2022 for hospital financing, that's in September, we'll know. And I know that what the author of the amendment read was, it came from my committee report on the Bill 121. And I understand that the intent is to transfer it all to the Income Tax Refund Efficiency Payment Trust Fund. We all agree that anytime any funds go to any fund, we say to ourselves, Hafasti, the law says don't do it for anything else. This will not be any different. If an emergency happens tomorrow or next year or 4 months from today, we're all going to look each other in the face, and you'll turn to me as the appropriation guy, and I'll turn to OFB and we'll say, where do we get the money? Then we're going to take a look at all the funds that are there. And we'll decide then, because depending on the emergency for the people of Guam. I agree. If we can pay 4 to 6 or 8 weeks out the tax refund, I fully support that. Based on cash, based on revenue brought in, not the EITC. EITC money that comes in is to pay the EITC. Money that comes in for CTC, child tax credit, is for child tax credit. That's why we put 74 million in the budget for the refunds. So, with that, I basically can't support this one, but, the body will decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Anyone else on the Terlahi amendment to the San Augustine amendment? Senator Perez, followed by Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of this amendment. I think what it does, it recognizes that, we don't always have the full information, and what are the terms that U.S. Treasury has made with the local government of Guam in regards to the reimbursement. I think that's the piece of information that, we need to know to really truly fully understand, how this money is going to be handled. And I do, I thank the author proffer of this amendment, who did a lot of work and research behind this. And, I think what it does, it just really sets up a contingency plan. I think that's always a good thing. If we don't have all the information, what is the backup plan? It doesn't take away from the financing for the hospital. It just assures that this money is used effectively. Money that is tied up in a bank, can perhaps have more beneficial uses if it's circulating in the economy. And considering, the dire circumstances that has been predicted by, OFB in regards to the economy, is it more beneficial to tie up money in a bank or to have it in the hands of those that need it? I think this is a policy issue that we are debating and deliberating. It allows for more flexibility. I think this is what this amendment does. So I rise in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Moylan on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to see tax refunds paid, of course, sooner. Just a quick little story. When I fought to try to get my tax refund when I was a younger guy, I had to make a special call and say I was going off island, and then I was able to get the envelope handed to me when I went to Revenue Tax. But that was a long time ago. Now those instances are no longer happening. But My concern is that even if we allow this amendment to the amendment to pass, in the law, we still have 6 months, or the governor still has 6 months. I have no idea if the governor will see this as extra cash to pay for it, to expedite the payments for tax refunds. I sure hope so. But still, at the end of the day, the governor has 6 months to do so. And as Director Byrd was saying, it's a matter of cash flow, and he works tight with DRT to make sure that cash flow is available. But priorities of the executive branch in executing the cash flow is all up to them. The bankroll could look nice, and I sure hope it will be a priority, but as I've been noticing from the executive branch, they have different priorities than what the legislature may necessarily want as a co-equal branch of government. Maybe we can look later, and instead of it being 6 months to pay a tax refund, why don't we make it 2 months? And then we can make it more of a priority for the executive to expedite payments. In the future, hopefully the cash flow would look much better, and EITC credit can go directly to that for sure, but for the ability for the governor to hold it for 6 months, even though we prioritize, that's just a concern for me. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Moylan. Anyone on the Terlahi amendment to the San Augustine amendment? Do you wish to close? There has been an objection.
Thank you. The $74 million that this substitute budget bill sets aside for the provision of tax refunds will pay refunds as we do now. The refunds will be processed and they will sit and wait for cash for payment within 6 months. You've heard me say that across the nation, the average is 6 to 8 weeks. And I believe the people of Guam need this money in this year faster than 6 months, and that we should strive at very least for 6 to 8 weeks, but I can see no reason why not 30 days after processing. The $74 million set aside in our bill is status quo. But it will not cover in advance the $55 million needed for earned income tax credits if we are going to pay them in advance of the reimbursement. Nor will it cover the past due amounts. It's only a set aside for current year. I think we have an opportunity to consistently, put before the administration, it's going to be their discretion. This bill is all about their discretion. This bill gives them this discretion, and my amendment gives them the discretion to hold $35 million during FY2022 in the Healthcare Center of Excellence Fund and lock it up. They can do that. Or if they decide it's not necessary because of financing, it's not ready, whatever they decide, whatever happens, they can immediately transfer this to pay refunds. So they can hold the money or they can pay the refunds. And again, there's no harm to any other agency. There's no harm to critical services. It's a win-win in my book, and it's something that the legislature can actually have some influence on. And if we see them hold the money, knowing that there is no plan or no concrete mechanism to use it, or that they, I guess we're giving them the discretion without, clear set financing, if not to use it for financing, to use it for any other thing, maybe the lease of the land. But they still have all that discretion. My amendment only changes that in the contingency, that DRT makes an arrangement with the Treasury, that we follow that arrangement, and that if they say reimbursements are going to be given to Guam in advance, then we welcome that, and we say, yes, we will comply, and we will pay those in advance, and we will set that money aside. And if the money is not necessary for a hospital, we are saying to taxpayers that we are committing to you that cash is going to go to you. If it is not necessary for a new hospital, we are committing to you that cash is going to you, and that we are going to be able to pressure the administration to pay these faster. And they will do it because we've seen them do it. They are willing to pay tax refunds. We should do our part and just prioritize the money there. And allow the flexibility by this amendment to provide for those contingencies. I think the people of Guam deserve this from us, that we can give this to them. You know, a promise of faster refunds, a promise to pay the past due refunds as a priority, as all prior legislations have agreed. And I agree, and I hope we all agree, that that continues to be our priority, and we're not saying something else today. So again, I humbly ask my colleagues to support this amendment.
Thank you very much, Speaker Terlahi. There has been an objection to the amendment.
If I could just add that legal make technical amendments is also added as part of the amendment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Speaker. There has been an objection to the amendment. Please signify your support for the amendment by raising your hand. Amendment fails. We are still on the San Agustin Amendment, Part A. Anyone on the amendment? Are there any objections to the amendment? No objections. Amendment passes. Now we move to Part B of the amendment. Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Part B is only to strike the word deposited and add the word reserved, replaced by the word reserved on letter B.
Thank you very much, Senator San Agustin. Anyone on the amendment? Section 6, EITC, letter B. Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do rise in support of this amendment, and certainly I do appreciate the presentation, actually, that was provided by Department of Corrections with regards to their plans, and I'm looking forward again to us having that discussion outside of the, moving forward with the budget that we need to do, so that at least we can look at their more refined outline plans, certainly seeing that some of our officials from DOC have gone off island to look at more recently constructed facilities, more modern facilities that hopefully can meet the requirements and the safety needs and protections for our community in the construction of a new prison. So with that, I certainly support this amendment that's been proffered by Senator San Agustin.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the amendment that changes the word deposited to reserved for the construction, design, financing, maintenance, and related expenses of the new Department of Corrections facility. I have no objection to that. I sincerely hope that this money is going to be reserved as is intended by this amendment. Although there's only one account that I know of, or two now, that seem to truly be lockboxed. That is the Earned Income Tax Refund account, because the courts have decided that, and the E911, because federal rules also govern that, and we have put penalties on that lockbox. But all others, we have seen the administration with their accounting, able to transfer these monies, despite all of our language saying they cannot transfer this money. And so my only concern is, again, who doesn't support the construction of DOC? But if it is not going to be ready in FY22, now they look more ready than anything. They have plans. I think they've been very realistic in their planning, and I commend them for that. And they've worked with all kinds of different partners in getting there. So I am hoping that this is going to be ready in FY22. But I just say, this mechanism that we're using here, we are setting aside EITC reimbursements that Department of Revenue and Taxation has told us might come in advance of our need to pay these. And we are hoping they come in advance so that we use that cash to pay refunds, because our $74 million that we've set aside does not include the $55 million for the earned income tax refunds that we will need to pay this year. So my only concern is that without, additional information at this time, we are setting aside money, and while we know that we have debt to taxpayers, that we are lingering in our payments to them of refunds, their money, and that I think this is one year that we can do better with that. And that's my only concern. But as to the change from deposit to reserve, of course, I have absolutely no objection to that, and I hope that it works its intended magic.
Thank you very much. Speaker, anyone else on the San Augustine amendment? Are there any objections to the amendment? Amendment passes. Senator San Augustine, you are still recognized. Okay. We'll take a quick recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Senator Perez, you are recognized for your amendment. Colleagues, we are on Amendment SB 55 SFP L15 P9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the amendment I'm proffering basically amends this section 6B. It states no less than 10% of all CTC, advanced and regular, and ACTC received by the government of Guam shall be deposited in the general fund. Such funds, no less than $9,350,000, shall be appropriated to the Department of Revenue and Taxation for personnel, overtime, equipment, supplies, training. That should be a comma. Supplies, comma, training, automation services. I guess training was duplicated here. Maybe it's training should be taken out. But supplies, then cross off training. Automation services and training for the Department of Revenue and Taxation, Taxpayer Services Division, Tax Enforcement Division, Real Property Tax Division, Director's Office, Regulatory Division, the Motor Vehicle Division for the driver's license and vehicle registration services. The Department of Revenue and Taxation, in collaboration with the Department of Administration, shall report quarterly to E Legislature in Guam on how the funds were expended. So it was stated earlier under testimony that Department of Revenue Taxation was cleared for $93.5 million in child tax credit. 50% will be in advance, and the other 50, I guess we don't know the information for that one. Given that information, I think it's essential to ensure that this money is going to DRT. I think the language that is currently there is not strong enough. So we don't know, again, I just want to make sure the language is strong enough so that DRT is actually getting this money once it gets into the general fund.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Titlegy, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question to the author of the amendment, if she should yield.
Please state your question.
Thank you. I do realize that Department of Revenue and Taxation is, well, they have a new responsibility, and that is now they're receiving this funding, to pay out to our community, those who receive the CTC and the ATC. And for Rev Tax to, incorporate such a different responsibility, I do realize that personnel is going to be needed as well as some equipment supplies. And one of the things that they might be needing is software to be able to, for the distribution of this funding and how to pay it out, that there's probably going to be software attached. So I just wanted to make sure that automation services is that different from, or maybe we should incorporate to that any software, or do you think that it's already, in this amendment?
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. Senator Perez, do you yield to the question?
Yes, I mean, I gladly accept any amendment if we want to add, including software in that, just to make sure that that's covered.
Okay.
Or we want to add software.
Yeah.
I mean, that I can see that it could probably fall under supplies, equipment, but if we want to be absolutely clear, we can add software to that.
Senator Titlegy.
Maybe I can ask OFB if there are areas maybe similar to this that allow for software equipment to be used, to purchase this. Is this sufficient enough to assume? I mean, is there any place else in in this bill that talks about this, that allows this kind of?
Senator, I'm not too sure what the restrictions are about using these funds to purchase those type of operational equipment, supplies, materials. The only concern that I have at this point is that no, that's to your answer. No, there's nothing that I know of any restrictions.
Is there anything in this bill that actually says software?
Are you referring that allows revenue taxation to purchase
No,
software?
not just revenue tax, anywhere in the, because usually if you want to be consistent, if you already indicate in one agency that software to allow them the purchase of software, if it's in one agency, then you kind of want to put it in the same agency too, be consistent. But, I'm just wondering if there is, if there's not, and the author of this amendment, feels that the equipment and supplies is enough, then, I have no issues with it. Pretty sure if they do need it, they'll come back, but,
I would believe that software would kind of fall under maybe supplies.
okay.
It is a supply to run,
Okay.
computers, so I'm sure it will
Okay.
fall into there.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I stand in full support of this amendment. As I mentioned before, revenue tax is going to be under a new, required to issue out tax credits, and they're going to need the additional assistance needed to do this. They received the money already up front, which is good, unlike the EITC. So this allows them that administrative cost to be used to formulate for all these reasons, personnel, overtime, et cetera, equipment, supplies, to gear up in order to get these tax credits out, these child tax credits out as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Chaitigui. Anyone on the Paris Amendment? Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a question to Mr. Guerrero with OFB. The language here says no less than 10% of all CTC and ACTC received by the government of Guam shall deposit into the general fund. In your estimation, what is 10%?
%, Senator, is pegged on the amount of revenues we set aside for the CTC and the ACTC.
Okay, so what is that? What is that figure? Rough shot.
I can get you the 10% based on the amount that we have for those two categories, but I believe that the amount that's being referenced is the amount that was reported out by revenue taxation as having been received already.
What's that, and what is that amount?
I believe it's the 9.3 million.
So it's the whole thing.
Yes, my understanding, that's what the amendment is trying to propose.
Sorry, I would like to withdraw the amendment. I want to submit a new one.
On the motion to withdraw the amendment, are there any
So-
objections?
So can I just withdraw from talking and then you can do that? Maybe that's a
Apologize.
little bit more kosher. Thank you. I withdraw.
Thank you. On the motion to withdraw the amendment, no objections. We'll take a brief recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We are on Amendment SB 55 SFP L15 P9R. Please refresh your drives. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the amendment that I proffered is similar, but basically I took out the amount. So the amendment basically would ensure that once the money is deposited in the general fund, it shall be appropriated to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So that's the change that was made. Given that we don't know the amount that's actually coming in, I don't want to necessarily put an amount there.
Anyone wishing to speak on the Perez amendment? On the Perez amendment? Yes, again, the amendment title is SB 55 SFP L15 P9R. We'll take a brief recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. It is just about 11:30 p.m., and we will break for lunch until 12:30 p.m. We are in recess.